welcome everyone, aspiring gardeners, aspiring farmers, farmers and home gardeners. Um, let's see, let me get my screen sharing and we will get started here. All right. So today we're going to be talking about my experiences with growing organic Asian vegetables on the coast along the Bay Area.
Hi there, my name is Delise Weir. I sit on the Friends of the Farm and Garden board, and I just want to welcome you all and let you know that this workshop is hosted by the UCSC Friends of the Farm and Garden, and we are a support organization. We exist to support CASFIS and bring their work to the public, which is you. And before pandemic times, we charged a nominal fee for these workshops. So there are lots of benefits to being a member. You get discounts, you get special entry to events, you get exclusive member events and more. If you have the means and can consider joining as a friend, I've put a little link in the chat to make it easy so you can sign up. But now we're ever so happy to offer a wonderful class with Scott Freeman Chang, who is a former apprentice, and we love when the apprentices take what they've learned and go off and make it their own, add their own flavor, and turn it into a thriving business. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah, glad to be here. All right, so a little bit about myself. So my name is Scott Chang-Fleeman. I am the farmer owner at Shao Shan Farm in Bolinas, California. I grew up in Los Angeles with little to no exposure to farming or even home gardening. Started getting into home gardening a little bit right before graduating high school, but really got most of my exposure at UC Santa Cruz through both my undergrad and my time as an apprentice at the UCSC Farm and Garden. So I come from a biracial Chinese American and white family. This is my mom's side of the family, my mom there on the left, my uncle and my auntie and my grandma. And I think a common thread for a lot of folks who are mixed race is, you know, all the kinds of identity struggles and crises that kind of come out of that, can come out of that. And for me, around a few years ago, during my time as right before I was a second year apprentice, I really started to kind of, you know, late 20s, start to like figure yourself out and explore your identity a little bit deeper. And the way that I decided to do that was really through food and agriculture, because, you know, for myself, food was always kind of the through line connecting me to my Chinese heritage. So, you know, going home for Chinese New Year, go out to dim sum here at Ocean Seafood in LA, making zhong, which is like Chinese tamales with my family, was kind of always the thing that could really gather my interest between food and agriculture. So it felt like a really great container to be able to explore some bigger, more daunting kind of questions, and yeah, just things I was thinking about. So during that time of kind of self-exploration, I was beginning my second year apprenticing at UC Santa Cruz. Here I am with Lucas and Brent. We were kind of the field crew with Daryl and Kirsten and Sky. And part of my time as a second year apprentice, which was great, was that Daryl and Kirsten really gave me kind of the space and resources and support to do a personal project that I wanted to do and something that I was curious in exploring. So for me, that meant exploring how to grow Chinese vegetables organically, because up until that point, you know, all of my experience with farming and gardening had really been from more of a Eurocentric crop perspective. So yeah, here I am with my first bitter melon that I ever grew. Some of the spaces like at the farm that I was able to grow stuff were like in between where the two hoop houses met, or like in between the orchard alleys that are usually just paths or roads. You know, they let me put garden beds there, and then also into some of the regular field blocks as well. So this personal project ultimately led to, you know, me having an abundance of vegetables and nowhere to sell them. And through connections from UC Santa Cruz, I eventually got connected with a chef in San Francisco who has a gourmet Chinese restaurant, Brandon Ju from Mr. Ju's. And I started just bringing him vegetables mainly to get feedback from the restaurant on, am I doing this right? Are these things that people want? Are these varieties that you like? And that kind of relationship eventually turned into somewhat of a partnership with the restaurant, and eventually into me launching a business selling to primarily chefs. So that brings me to Shao Shan Farm. So I started Shao Shan Farm going into my third season. So I started it 2 years ago, right away after finishing my second year apprenticing. So my first season, I farmed 2.5 acres all on my own, doing all the production, all of the business side, all of the deliveries, all the markets, while working night shifts, 20 hours a week in a restaurant. Don't recommend that path for anyone. But it was a crazy year, but learned a lot. And also realized that there was a really huge demand from both restaurants and farmers market customers, as well as from the broader Asian American community, to see certified organic Asian vegetables. So last year was the second year of the farm, and I was able to bring on my first full-time employee, Abby, here, as well as a couple of part-time folks as well. We also added an additional 3 acres last year. So last year we were farming, went up from 2.5 to 5.5 acres in production. Where the farm is located is in Bolinas, California. So we're in West Marin County. It's a little town between Stinson and Point Reyes. It's a really popular surf spot, also really popular kind of locals only spot. We're located less than a mile from the ocean on 2 sides and less than a mile from the lagoon on the 3rd side. So we have a lot of coastal influence, really cool summers, very similar to coastal Santa Cruz or San Francisco Bay Area kind of climate. We have really foggy summers, really cool summers. It rarely breaks 80 degrees, which poses a challenge and also a benefit for growing a lot of Asian vegetables. So because we have such a cool summer, we really focus heavily on cool season Asian vegetables kind of all year round. A lot of the stuff that traditionally people only grow in the winter. So that means a lot of leafy greens, a lot of scallions, a lot of radishes. And then we also grow head lettuces and zucchini and kind of a full kale, chard, full range of kind of farmers market staple vegetables as well. So here's just some shots of the one of the fields. This is a green Chinese radish that we got kind of known for, but you can see it's like a sea of green. Not a lot of fruiting crops. After starting the farm too, kind of started as a personal project for my own self-discovery, but what it really is now, I feel like, and what really gives me a lot of purpose is hopefully serving as somebody who can help develop the market for certified organic Asian vegetables in the Bay Area, and kind of proof of concept that these vegetables are really desirable, and that Asian American folks who are underrepresented in agriculture have a place to be growing culturally relevant foods, and that it's a really great way for beginning farmers to get into it. So this is Christina, who came out to visit during my first season while she was on a couple-week internship at Namu Farm with Kristen Leach. She came out and spent a couple days with me, kind of checking out the farm, and we talked about what it was like to be in my first year farming. At this time, she had a little garden project where she was growing organic Chinese vegetables in raised beds in New York City. And now after that season, she's currently farming. She moved to the Hudson Valley in New York, and now she has her own Chinese vegetable CSA. We employ a lot of Asian American folks and a lot of mixed race Asian American folks who also kind of resonate with the, exploring identity through food and agriculture. So these are just some of the folks that I was fortunate enough to be able to work with last year. We have Ayano, who did our markets and also helped on the farm. Dongyi, Abby, who is my full-time employee, Ian, Meg, who was working for the previous farmer where we were at, and was kind of our local backup, who ended up fortunately being able to come on full time later in the season. And sometimes I rope Gabby from Lunaria Farm into helping me harvest flowers. I also want to say I think there's a Q&A that Delise is running, and I'm hoping to leave a lot of room for questions at the end. Um, yeah. So yeah, going into growing Asian vegetables. So why grow Asian vegetables organically? Bunch of reasons. These are just some of them. Connection to land, family, and culture. Lack of access to organic Asian vegetables. Seed preservation for varieties that maybe are not as common. Small farm market potential. Continuing the deep history of Asian American agriculture, and they also are just delicious. So connection to family was one that was, kind of grew out of the personal project for myself, but really developed in ways that I didn't anticipate. Primarily being that, all of my family, I come from a big Chinese family that all live in Los Angeles pretty much, um, except for one of my aunties, my Auntie Pam and Uncle Howard, who happened to live, of all places, like 20 minutes away from the farm that I ended up leasing. So I'd never met these people before. But when I was moving up to Marin, I was talking to my mom, like, oh, I found some land in like near Point Reyes Station. She's like, oh, you got to call Auntie Pam. Like maybe she knows someone like who has housing for you. It's like, I don't know who Auntie Pam is, but I guess I'll show up. And had basically left Castus as a second year apprentice, loaded up my truck with everything I owned, and then drove to their house. Asked, I was like, oh, hey, like, I'm your second cousin once removed. Do you know anybody who's renting a house in Point Reyes Station? They're like, well, you can stay with us for a while. When do you think you're going to move in? And I was like, I got everything right now, and basically moved in that day. And now we're super close, and I see them all the time, and they're super, super helpful with the farm. Their house is a CSA pickup location for me. Yeah, really great. Similarly, I met a couple cousins that live in the East Bay, and one of whom, her mom's side of the family, were Chinese farmers in the Central Valley, and she was able to give me a bunch of seed that her grandma who had passed had collected in like a shoebox, as well as some Chinese shallots that her side of the family had been growing that the family had brought from China when they immigrated a few generations ago. Connection to culture. So I'm a big believer in the power and the impact of land justice and occupying land for communities of color. So out here in Bolinas, we have it's like 99.7% white on the last census data. So I can confidently say I think I know like 90% of the Asian American folks who live in the three towns out here. And when I moved out here, what I found was a lot of people were really excited to see the project that I was doing. And also were all voicing to me that they felt a lot of isolation living out here, with a lack of any kind of cultural kind of center for them. So what we ended up doing was having a monthly potluck where, I would bring some food from the farm, and folks would cook stuff from the farm, and folks would cook whatever they wanted. And we just have a big Asians of West Marin potluck, which kind of stemmed out of a joke. Like when I moved out here, I looked at the census and it said there's like 18 Asian American folks in Bolinas. And somebody said to me like, oh, you could just have them all over for dinner. And then we ended up basically doing that. Yeah. Lack of access is another reason to grow organic Asian vegetables. These are a few folks. This is Celeste and Bing and Jacqueline, who all live out here, who they voiced to me how excited they were because they'd kind of stopped eating Asian vegetables because they have a really strong sourcing ethic of only wanting to eat organic food, and they try to buy everything as local as possible. And they were really missing, vegetables that they had grown up with and that they really enjoy. And so for them, it really, I think Celeste told me, she said, she was like, I never thought I would be able to see this, like, like, and that just like for me makes it so worth it. Another reason to grow organic Asian vegetables is the potential for small farms. A lot of these vegetables are underrepresented at farmers markets, and there's a huge demand, especially in the Bay Area where there's such a huge Asian American population. Especially, I'd say the cool season Asian vegetables are harder to come by through the summer, whereas a lot of the hotter season vegetables, there's a little bit more competition from a lot of farms in Fresno. But by the time we had kind of built our customer base at the Clement Street Farmers Market, we were showing up with 3 pallets worth of produce and selling out every day within the first couple hours. We just really can't keep up with the demand at this point. Another reason is to continue the rich history of Asian American agriculture, especially in California. There's so much to say on this, and I'm not even going to begin getting into Asian Californian agricultural history, but I just want to point out one book that I really like, which is Eating Asian American by Nina Ichikawa, that one on the left. It's a really great Asian studies reader from NYU Press. But yeah, it feels really important for me to kind of be continuing in this legacy of, especially in California, being a Chinese American farmer. So why not to grow Asian American vegetables? So there are some pitfalls, especially if you're going to be going into, if you're a small farmer, or if you're a farmer selling at markets. There's a lot of common pitfalls that I see that I would say are reasons not to be growing Asian vegetables. So a lot of people will grow stuff and kind of coin it as like exotic or oriental, weird, unusual vegetables, and try to like have some kind of, I don't know, like create almost like some kind of shock factor, like buzz interest at their farmers market stand, which I think at their worst it really serves to dehumanize and stereotype Asian Americans as like, forever, this concept of like being forever foreign. And at its best are kind of just inaccurate representations of the ubiquity of these food crops. A lot of times they're marketed in seed catalogs as rare, when really, like Johnny says, like the unusual crops like choy sum, which is like by far my biggest selling vegetable and like one of the most common vegetables for Chinese people. So at their best, it's just totally inaccurate. And another pitfall is what some people call like superfooding vegetables, which is basically perpetuating like the idea that these foods are new discoveries, or that there's these health benefits that nobody ever knew about, and using that basically to like enter traditional culturally important foodways into this capitalist lens and just profit off of kind of the like health benefits and things that people already know about. And just kind of strip it of any cultural importance. This next slide is just me venting about Baker Creek seeds. I'm going to warn everybody. I think that Baker Creek is one of the biggest offenders of like exotifying not just Asian vegetables, but pretty much any kind of cultural crop, any kind of crop from any non-white food like region. And yeah, so when I started this farm in like 2019, they had put out this like their new catalog, which came with like their letter for the year. And literally within the same paragraph, they said like, oh, we went to like this year, we went to China and we got all these really cool, weird, unusual like seed varieties. Also, we adopted 2 children, which to me was just really weird to be putting like literally 2 sentences apart, something that's like as big of a life decision as adopting children with like, we're collecting seeds. And I thought that was weird. And then I kept reading the catalog, and one of the children that they adopted was featured 7 times, and all 7 times was with an Asian seed varietal, whereas their white kids were not. So it just felt really weird. I mean, like I don't know them, but to be featured with like a Japanese variety, a Mongolian variety, a Chinese variety, a Korean variety, I feel like just feels like they're using their child as a prop. And that's kind of just compounded with the fact that they also had a conference where they invited a known white supremacist as their keynote speaker, Cliven Bundy. And that they also are, notorious for superfooding things and supporting this guy, Joseph Simcox, who calls himself a botanical explorer, which I feel like the concept of being an explorer, is like, aren't we on the same page? That's like not okay. But anyways, I digress. So back to our farm. So how we think about crop planning and how we consider the crops that we're going to be growing to kind of avoid a lot of those pitfalls, and also just for within our own community, how I like to think about growing. So there's really 3 spheres that I think about when I'm deciding the crops that I'm going to choose. The first one being that the land is going to tell us what to grow. So all of these things are taking into consideration that the Chinese American community in California, and more broadly the Asian American community, is a community in diaspora. So our crops are coming from, a lot of the things I grow are native to southern China, which has a very, very different climate and very different kind of like terroir than San Francisco. So one of the main drivers of how we think about what we're going to grow is just listening to the land and the climate that we're in. And that was a big decision for deciding to grow cool season Asian vegetables and focusing on that. The second aspect, though, is that a lot of these crops have a high cultural significance. And even though they might not necessarily grow super well where we are, they're so important that it's going to affect the decisions that we make and the ways that we choose to grow things. So, things like eggplant and bitter melon don't grow well here at all, but we still try to grow them. We grow a little bit every year, but we grow them, in either landscape fabric or black plastic mulch to heat up the soil. We'll grow them in high tunnels. We'll cover them with row cover to increase soil temperatures, things like that. So a crop is so significant that it's going to alter the way that we grow so that we can grow it in somewhere where it doesn't grow very well. And then the third way that I like to think about crop planning is that human and plant relationships are dynamic, adaptive, and coevolutionary, and that our connection to seed allows us to create new varieties, traits, and culture. And what I mean by that is that the process of seed saving inherently adapts seeds over time. So if we're selecting for, or if we're growing a chili pepper that doesn't really grow super well in Bolinas where it's so cold, but every year we're picking, the first peppers that come on from the healthiest looking plants that are earliest and thriving the best in our cold temperature. And I pick those every year and I save those seeds and replant those every year. Over time, we're subconsciously selecting and breeding and designing, that chili pepper to really thrive in the area that we are. And this point is really important for me because I think it really mirrors a lot of the way that humans, through migration and immigration stories, really adapt and grow through subsequent generations, and how the culture of the Chinese Americans looks different with every single generation, but it all kind of stems from our ancestors. But ideally, every generation we're changing a little bit, thriving more, things like that. So the other way that I like to think about crops is more from like the agronomic perspective. So that I'm going to talk about basically the way that I break down the crops into 3 different groups, being single planting, single harvest. So something you plant once, harvest it once, and you're done, also called succession crops. Second being extended harvest crops. So you plant it once, but then you get to pick off of it for a really long time. And then storage crops. So something that you plant it once, and then you harvest it, and then it can store, and you can keep it for a really long time out of the ground, out of the garden. So succession crops are probably the bulk of what we grow here, and a lot of the cool season Asian vegetables would fall into this category. So like I said, these are crops that are going to be planted on a frequent basis to ensure that we have a constant harvest. A lot of our cool season crops are greens, and a lot of these are planted directly into the garden or onto the farm as seeds, not as transplants. So we plant seeds straight into the ground. We don't transplant baby plants. Some examples of these are gailan, which is Chinese broccoli, bok choy, choy sum, tongho, which is a chrysanthemum green, cabbages, cauliflowers, and sometimes scallions, which I'll talk about. Also a note, a lot of these photos I just screen grabbed from my Instagram, so that's why there's like all these like little marketing plugs on the pictures. This is a Chinese cauliflower, which we grew this last year for the first time and was just so killer and grew so amazingly all summer long, which I feel like usually cauliflower can be a little tricky, but the Chinese cauliflowers really grow well basically year round, which is great. So succession crops, like I said, you plant them once, you harvest them once. So, on the right, we have Abby in this early planting of Napa cabbage and these Taiwanese cabbages in the hoop house. And then on the left, when they're ready, we cut them, and you can see, we cut the cabbage out. We're not getting another cabbage out of that. So, that means that, if you're thinking about how often do you want to be planting these, it's really dependent on how frequently you want them and how much you want. So could be every week you plant them so that every week you have something to harvest, or, every other week. Really depends on your need. For us, we plant them every single week. Some of the challenges with these succession crops are like space requirement. because you're constantly planting, you know, you need a certain amount of space so that you can have space every week to be putting the next round in. If you're doing a lot, time requirements, you know, we're planting every single week through the summer, versus like a tomato, you know, if we were tomato farmers, we would plant all of our tomatoes in the spring and then we'd just be harvesting. We're planting all year long. Pests, especially the flea beetle, which I'll talk about. um, a lot of Asian greens are brassicas, and like even more so than kales and cabbages and brassicas like that. Like flea beetles just love them. But the benefits and why I personally like to grow a lot of these succession crops, you have a lot of chances in case something fails. So stuff always goes wrong. You know, maybe we'll lose a whole bed of bok choy, but the good thing is we already have the next bed's going to be ready next week. So you have a lot of chances. They grow really quickly. So if you're impatient, it's a nice thing to grow. A lot of our crops that we put in are from seed to harvest only take 35, 40 days. You know, you in with the longest day length time of the year, you can really get a harvest within a month. And with that, they also quickly outcompete weeds. So if you're on it with your cultivation, because these plants grow so fast and you can space them so closely, if you nail your first weeding really well, they'll outcompete the weeds and they'll smother the surface and shade out any kind of competition. So it can be a really great way to keep weed pressure down in your farmer garden. Also, because they're out so fast, even if you miss your weeds, by the time you've harvested the crop, you're ready to turn over those beds. And this picture is from Blue Heron Farms down in Corlitos, from Dennis Tamura's farm. And here he's doing, you can see how close you can plant these. These are 5 rows of Shanghainese bok choy on a 52-inch, he's on 52-inch tire centers on his tractor. So that's maybe like a 40-inch bed top. He has 5 rows, so you can really cram them in. I say scallions sometimes are a succession crop because for us on a farm scale, we grow them as successions. We plant these little plugs and then we harvest the entire bunch all at once. And then that's it. We can't harvest it again because we pull it out, roots and everything. But you can see that picture on the right is from my grandma's house, where, you know, my grandma and my family, we always would buy scallions or green onions from the grocery store or the farmer's market. And we only really use the green part. But then you can take that white bit and you can plant it into some potting soil, like in a cinder block, or you can even just put it on your windowsill in a glass of water, and the greens will keep coming back and you can just cut those over and over again. So just to focus in on one crop in particular, we'll talk about bok choy. And this is applicable to a lot of different Asian vegetables: tot soy, gailan, mizuna, mustards. We do it all kind of the same way as this. We will prep our beds with the tractor. We sow 3 rows on a 52-inch bed with 12 seeds per foot is our target. We usually end up getting way more than that because the seeds are tiny. Then we immediately cover it with row cover, which I'll talk about a little bit more later with pests. And then 2 weeks after planting, we come through and we weed. And then 30 days after planting, we come through and we harvest half the bed as a loose cut. And then over the next 2 weeks, we'll harvest it as a bunch screen when it's a little bit bigger. And we plant a 200-foot bed every single week on a 10-week cycle. So basically, by the time we've gotten to the 10th bed, the first one has been cleared, tilled in, had time to decompose, reshaped, and ready to plant again. So you can see on the right is this as small as we harvest it as a little loose green. And on the left, that's when we start selling it as bunches. I wanted to talk about bok choy because there's a lot of different sizes out there if you go through seed catalogs. And one of the most popular ones is a variety called Joy Choy, which is this massive bok choy here on the left. And you can see compared to, there's a variety, the smallest one over there on the table is called Extra Dwarf from Kitazawa. Then it goes to Dwarf, and then it goes to Joy Choy. So there's a wide variety of sizes. We grew one succession of the Joy Choy just to have some diversity for our CSA of bok choy sizes. But if you're growing from like a marker perspective, this is a common pitfall I see at farmers markets, is a lot of people who don't have a relationship with Asian vegetables will grow the Joy Choy because it grows really easily, grows huge, really great variety, but nobody buys it. Like you will not see bok choy this big in Chinese restaurants or in Chinese kitchens. I kind of threw it in there almost as a novelty for our customers. And a lot of people messaged me asking me what this vegetable was, because they didn't recognize it as bok choy because it's so huge. Bok choy is traditionally pretty tiny. So on to the next category of crops, we have our single planting extended harvest. So these are plants you plant once, you can pick off of kind of all summer. Um, these can be either direct seeded or transplanted. I'd say generally, if it has a big seed, we direct seed it, um, but we'll also transplant stuff as well. Smaller seeds I like to transplant. So things like Chinese cucumbers, bitter melons, yard-long beans, snow peas, eggplants, chili peppers, tomatoes, herbs. And this would also, I would consider like perennials kind of into this too. You just plant it once and you have it kind of for life. So on our farm, like goji berries, gao choy, which is a Chinese chive, or hawthorn for the hawthorn berries. This picture is of a Korean perilla, so like a type of herb used for som. And this is a variety that Kristen Leach from Namu Farm developed, and it's really delicious, grows amazingly well, really great big leaves for wraps. Yeah. So when to plant these plants? Everything's variable, but in general, where we're at, these are going to be a lot of our hotter season crops. So for us in Bolinas, Santa Cruz is a little bit hotter than Bolinas, but for us in Bolinas, we actually kind of have to wait until late April, even May, for soil temperatures to get up to where I'd like them. And if we're direct seeding something like our winter melons or other Asian melons, I'm waiting until June or July even to do that. So heat is going to be the biggest problem for a lot of these vegetables. But ways to overcome that, you can start them indoors in a greenhouse on a heat mat. Start them early and try to get them as big as you can before planting them out in the field to kind of get them to a place of maturity, and then planting them out when it's a little bit hotter. You can grow them in black plastic mulch or landscape fabric. I try to not use black plastic. I don't like to use it, but again, back to how I decide about crop planting, this is one of those areas where for sustainability, we kind of, I'll make some sacrifices on my like sustainability ethics really for like cultural importance and ability to grow these crops locally. So then, there's the toss up of, is it more sustainable, or is it more sustainable to be like importing them or getting them from farther away? I don't know. This is something where like straw mulch or like wood chip mulch wouldn't quite work as well. Those tend to actually cool the soil down. You really want, if you're going for heat, you're going to want to use plastic or black landscape fabric, or they also are starting to make a black paper mulch that you can roll out a paper sheet that's black, because you need the black color to really heat up the soil. You can plant stuff in a greenhouse or in a high tunnel. That's what we do. You can use row cover again. That keeps pests off, but it also increases temperatures. And then, like I said earlier, you can save seeds from the best and earliest crops, and hopefully adapt that variety to suit your cool climate. So yeah, here's just some examples of things: chili peppers, goji berries, that Chinese chive. We don't actually grow that at the farm, but that's a little plot at my auntie's house in Point Reyes. So I wanted to focus on Asian cucumber varieties because this is one that actually grows really well on the coast without having to do all of these overcoming heat challenge things. So you can direct seed these or transplant them. We do both, but for the earliest ones, I'll start them in a cell tray. We use 72s, but if you're at home, you could use a 6-pack, that you have left over from the nursery. So we'll start them indoors in March with the goal to plant them out in early April in our high tunnel, but we also grow them outdoors. So in the high tunnel, we will grow them, we allow them to grow about 3 feet tall up on this netting that you see. And then we come through and we prune everything off the lower 2 feet of it to increase airflow and kind of put all the energy into growing that main single stalk. And then we train that main central stalk and prune off any kind of side shoots until it reaches the top of the trellis, and then we let it kind of span out. Then once they're producing, we'll be harvesting 2 to 3 times a week. If we're growing them outdoors, we do a lot more successions, because outside with the cucumbers on the coast, you get a problem with all the fog settling on the leaves produces disease. So the high tunnel for the cucumber case isn't actually for added heat. It's actually to keep the leaves dry. So if you're growing them outdoors, I like to do a few successions, maybe like once a month, be planting them, but not as frequently as greens. And for the outdoor ones, we don't prune or trellis just because it's, we just do more successions. But you could definitely prune kind of the same style that I'm talking about outdoors as well. Um, so there's my neighbor Hannah who helped me prune on that day, and you can see the netting we use, and you can see how they've been. We've cut everything back, so there's one really clear, distinct leader kind of climbing that trellis. And then on the right, you can see, we started getting those cucumbers, and you can see how short those plants are still. They're barely. We didn't even start pruning them yet, and we were already starting to harvest. So they can be really prolific on the coast. There's a few different there's a bunch of different varieties of Asian cucumbers. The ones that we grow are here. This is a Japanese cucumber, which is going to be a little bit smoother skin, but definitely has those little bit of spikes on them. Kind of a long cucumber, really great. This is a variety called Nokia from Johnny's. It's got a thin skin, really small seeds, delicious, produces a ton on the coast. On the left is our most popular cucumber, which is a long. We grow an open pollinated variety of that. Those are Chinese cucumbers. And you can see these are from ones that were not trellised. So the thing with Chinese cucumbers is they're really, really long, and trellising them is nice because you get straight fruits. So if you're, selling them to grocery stores, definitely they won't buy them if they're curvy. Sometimes chefs are fine with it, but in general, our chefs really like to have straight fruits because it's easier to process. You don't have to like turn your knife all these crazy angles. Um, but for CSA, it's actually kind of fun for them, and people really, and at farmers market too, people kind of get a kick out of the curly. But sometimes they'll do full spirals and all that, and it's really fun sometimes. And then on the right, the brown cucumber is a Korean variety that we harvest either young green or we let it get to full maturity here, and it looks really great. It looks like a dinosaur egg, and these are chopped up and either used for kimchi or cucumber salads. They're just salted like that. They kind of taste like watermelon rind at this point. They're really nice. So the next category of crops is going to be the storage crops. So these are things that we generally will plant once in a large amount, harvest the whole thing all at once, and then store it, and then we can sell it or eat it over a long period of time out of the garden. Um, a lot of these are crops that are culturally associated with winter and kind of harvest and things like that because prior to refrigeration, these are the crops that would be getting people through the winter without being able to refrigerate stuff. A lot of these will require dry storage. Some require wet storage too, which I'll talk about, but that can be a challenge with this. So if you grow a lot of it but you don't really have anywhere to put it, it can be a bit of a challenge. And some examples are Asian pumpkins, donggua, which is a winter melon, which is basically like a winter squash in the sense that you eat it in the winter, but it's closer to like a melon. You use it for soup, though. It tastes like cucumber mixed with watermelon rind. Shallots and some radishes and turnips as well, and dry beans. So a lot of them need dry storage. Crops like dry beans. On the left, I'm on my eternal struggle and search to find a variety of Itzuki bean or Hongdo, the red bean, that's commonly used in desserts. These are they like high temperatures. They don't like the coast. I tried twice once as my first year apprenticing, again as a second year apprentice, again my first year farming, and then last year we finally were able to pull off this is a variety that I got from Oregon State University that seemed pretty promising. So with these, you need to harvest all of it at once, process the beans, and then store it somewhere dry so that they don't mold or sprout. Same thing with our shallots. We'll pick all the shallots. We leave them on this tarp to kind of decay in the sun a little bit and get the moisture out of them. And then we pack those into bulb crates that are really shallowly packed, and they've got a lot of airflow, and we leave those in a dry storage place. Some things, though, do like wet storage. So things like daikon radish, what else, Japanese turnips, certain things like that, root crops mainly, will harvest all of the root crop. We'll top them. We'll take the greens off because that keeps them good longer. We'll wash them, and then we put them in big bags, and those bags go into our cooler. And the bag helps to retain the moisture on the radish because the radish is basically still alive. Like, it's the whole root that you're taking up. So if there's water, it's going to keep that root alive. So for us, if for any other farmers out there, like production wise, I really like to do storage radishes because you can pull them all in all at once, process them all at once, and then we bag them, we weigh them, and we write the weights on the bag, which you can see. And then that way we have, these radishes. We'll start selling them out straight, fresh out of the field, and then we bring them all in at once, and then they'll hold in our cooler for up to a month window to be selling them. So that way we only have to plant daikon radish once a month, harvest the whole thing, and we can sell it over the whole month. Um, and yeah, it's just really easy too. So like you can see here in this photo, we had an order for like 100 pounds or something of radish, and I was able to go in the cooler and just kind of add up based off the tags on the bags. I could just load up the truck, and I already know everything was pre-weighed out already, so it's really easy. Um, so I want to focus on this one. I'm going to focus on dry farmed Asian pumpkins or kabocha squash, which is one that we specialize in here. Um, and this is one that is really unique to being on the coast also. So we do our spring bed prep, our field prep, we all that stuff with the tractor, get our beds ready. We soak the seeds for our pumpkins. Not really overnight. We just did it kind of in the morning before we were going to plant. And then we plant the seeds really deep into the soil. So we go about 4 inches deep and we put a seed every foot. We come back 2 to 3 weeks later, cultivate, take out any weeds, and we thin. We have a sprout ideally every foot, and then we thin them out to whichever one looks stronger so that they're every 2 feet. And then basically grows all summer long. We don't even look at it. Maybe we'll come through and pick some weeds that we missed if we see the flowers sticking out of the field. But it just grows all summer. We let the plants eventually die, and then clip the squash from the vines, let them sit out in the field clipped for a few weeks to get any kind of excess moisture out of them and let the skins thicken up. And then we pack them into 50-pound cases right in the fields and put them right into storage. And then we can sell them for up to 6 months afterwards. So again, this is from Instagram. So this is why there's all these little red notes. But the one on the left, you can see this is how we plant our squash. We last year didn't have any kind of fancy planters. I just got some that I haven't set up yet, but we just use the simple sled that I built for transplanting vegetables. Also works really great for planting these big direct seeded crops. So it's basically just a disc that goes down 4 to 6 inches deep, opens up a trough, and me or my employee would sit on the back with our soaked seeds in my dog bowl, and just plop them in about eyeballed every foot or so. And then on the right, you can see that's about a week later after everything sprouted, a little bit longer. If you're used to growing winter squash, I would say with this dry farming technique, there's about a week to 2 weeks where I'm panicking and I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. This isn't going to work because the soil was almost dry when these went in. I would say it was like just barely wet to the touch. We had a really, really dry winter last year. And I was really nervous that we were even going to have enough moisture to get these to establish. And for about 2 weeks, I'm like digging through, looking for the seeds, trying to find them. And I'm like, oh, thank God it germinated. And like, oh, but now I just killed this plant. Like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just trusted it. So really, I've learned like just to trust it. We plant them really deep, so it takes a lot longer than normal for them to sprout because they're planted so deep. But they will find their way up. And then that's about maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks after we planted there on the right. And then in the summer, it looks like this. And basically, all of this foliage grew, and after we planted, we walked away. It never got watered once. We didn't even water it when we planted the seeds. We just planted them directly into whatever residual moisture there was deep down in our beds. And we walked away and let the plants kind of struggle and search for that water on their own. And here on the coast, where we have this foggy coastal influence, it doesn't get that hot, so the plants don't transpire too much, and the squash really just thrive. But there's a couple things you need to be able to dry farm like this. So you do need coastal influence. I would say if you're like, if you're anywhere off the coast, it's probably gonna be too hot to do this. But when you have cool summers, it works really great. You want to make sure you have healthy soil is going to increase your yield and your water holding capacity. So high soil organic matter, a lot of compost in your soil. We also have like a sandy loam soil with a subsoil that's high clay, and the high clay is nice because it actually holds a lot of water. So the sandy loam will dry out, but then there's underneath all of that sand, there's a big reservoir of clay. Um, you need some way to be able to plant these deeply. If you're at your home garden, you can do, and you're only doing a few, it's no problem. But if you're on a farm, you're going to want a pretty deep way to plant the seeds pretty deep, or to dig a trench to get down to that soil and then plant into that trench. You need to use the right varieties. Not every variety of squash or tomato or anything that you can dry farm can be dry farmed. Some are a lot better than others. All the kabocha we grew were hybrid varieties, which are nice because you want that early, really vigorous early establishment so that they can get up while they have the most amount of moisture and really take advantage of it before the moisture starts to run out. We do a couple open pollinated as well, and this year we're going to start a breeding project to be dehybridizing some of these hybrid varieties. So hopefully we can save seed off of them and really select for a really good dry farm squash, because there are a lot of open pollinated squashes that do lend to dry farming, but not so many kabochas. More Central South American varieties that are historically dry farmed. And then nothing is drought tolerant in a pot. So if you're like, just got some like raised beds or some pots on your back patio, you're not gonna be able to do this because there's no bank of moisture in that raised bed. So is how we harvest them. We drive through with the tractor with a pallet jack or pallet forks on the back. We pack them straight into these boxes after they've field cured. They're all about 50 pounds. And then I can just drop that pallet and then go to the market, and they're all packed up, and it's super easy. When I load up the truck for farmer's market, I just grab a box. I know it's 50 pounds of green, 50 pounds of red, 50 pounds of blue, ready to go. And this is actually from the dongua, the winter melon, but very similar root structure. We dry farm the winter melon as well. We a little bit different. We water it to establish it late in July, or in July, and then we cut water. But you can see how vigorous these roots are. They really just search for that water. You don't have to baby them. So overall, just some challenges for organic Asian vegetables. A lot of these I mentioned: lack of heat, flea beetles, which I'll go into, crop rotation on the coast. So a lot of these vegetables are brassicas, and that's a big problem for me, is trying to find other non-brassicas to be able to crop rotate. Seed availability: a lot of Asian vegetable seeds are conventional only because the market hasn't quite developed for organic. Lack of university research and extension, and small community support. There's not a lot of Asian vegetable growers that are growing organically, so there's not a lot of people to ask for support and like, oh, how do you do this? How did you do that? So flea beetle is going to be by far the biggest pest that you're going to face growing organic Asian vegetables. It is the bane of my existence. So the main way that we mitigate this is through row cover, that white fabric you can see. It's basically a really light fabric. You want to find the lightest gauge row cover you can get. This one's called AG15. And that just essentially creates a physical barrier between the pests being able to get in onto your crop and the crop itself. The problem with row cover is it's so much work to manage. It's like when it's windy out, it takes like 3 people to wrestle this down. And then if it tears, because it's very thin, you don't want it to be thicker, otherwise it's going to heat up too much. So you need it to be really thin so it doesn't heat up, but then it's really thin and it rips, and then there's a hole in it, so then the bugs can get in. Also, if the bugs are already there underneath it, they're just going to sprout, they're going to erupt out of the soil underneath the row cover and still eat everything anyways, and then they're protected from predators. So row cover helps, I think, partially because it keeps the pests off, partially the added heat makes the crops grow faster and outgrow the flea beetle. But ultimately, you're going to have flea beetles anyways. And we've done a lot of work with our customers to kind of communicate with them around like, why are there little shotgun holes on the leaves? And, it's because we don't spray anything. And it's a big reason that there aren't organic Asian vegetables. So we kind of like take some pride and, do education around the holes in the leaves. And by and large, our customers really appreciate it, and they see that as like, oh, okay, like there's a reason why all the other greens don't have those holes. It's because they all use conventional pesticides. Seed accessibility, like I said, can be a problem. Some of the seed companies that sell Asian varieties are Kitazawa is the main one that I get my seeds from. Most everything on there, I think everything is conventional though. Agro Haiti, or Haitai, Agro Haitai is I think now owned by Kitazawa, but they sell Asian vegetables too. Evergreen, I think, might have closed during the pandemic. And then Second Generation Seeds, which is a seed project I'll talk about in a little bit, that's coming soon. um, Chinatown, there's like some folks who sell like the aluminum foil packet stuff if you're like a home gardener. I found one great little shop in Chinatown that she buys bulk seed and repackages it into manila envelopes for, if you're just a hobby gardener. Ask your family and friends if you are Asian American. A lot of times folks immigrate and bring seeds with them, or, our ancestors are like seed breeders and amazing gardeners. And a lot of times they have a ton of knowledge and a ton of seeds too. And then you can save your own as well. So Second Generation Seeds is a little project that I'm working on with Kelly from UC Santa Cruz and Kristen Leach from Namu Farm and Ari Delenia from Kamayan Farm in Seattle and Alvina Wong from Asian Pacific Environmental Network. This is basically a seed line that we're hoping to launch in the next year. It's up already, but we're hoping to expand it a lot more in the next few years. And the goal really with this is to be growing Asian vegetable seeds and varieties that are adapted for the Bay Area, and have, along with them, we do participatory research and breeding with not just like from a plant scientist university kind of perspective, but we really start with community and asking community what the traits in vegetables are that they are looking for, as well as chef partners. And then we work kind of from the grassroots bottom up for the way that we choose to develop and breed plant varieties. So this last year we were working, and we're continuing to work with Seed Savers Exchange Network to work through a massive list of their Asian seed varietals that they haven't grown out because they don't really have the market for it. And last year we grew out about 30 different pepper varieties, Asian pepper varieties across our farms, just to kind of trial them, see if we can identify them. Seed Savers didn't even know what a lot of them were. They were kind of unnamed. And we were able to identify a few of those, which this year I'll be growing out to hopefully duplicate and make available for retail seed packets next year. This is just an example of, a chef partner that I worked with who they all got really excited. And this is their like spicy, like mild to spicy little pictograph that they made. And yeah, I just want to emphasize again, this isn't a presentation on seed saving, but I think that saving seed is super crucial and is a really great way to both adapt Asian varieties to your area, as well as to get access to organic seed that might not be available. And I just want to say also with all this, like anyone can be a seed saver. Saving seed is more like not saving your own seed for your farm or garden is a newer concept than saving seed. You don't have to be a plant scientist or somebody working for a university to be a plant breeder. You can, a lot of our family still do it and ancestors do it. And it's a really great way to, when you save seed, you're not just, saving some money for the next season on your seed bill, but you're really recording memories and flavors and tradition and putting intention and memory into that seed for the next year. Yeah. Here's some resources, and I think all this presentation is going to be sent out in a PDF, so you don't have to like screenshot this or anything, but got some seed companies up there, as well as that Eating Asian American book that I really like for Asian American food histories. The Chinese Kitchen Garden is a really rad home gardener guide to Chinese vegetables that I like. There's a old like 80s UC guide, which is like, as far as I can tell, the last like thing the UC has done around Asian vegetables for specialty and minor crops. And the cover actually is Dennis Tamura from Blue Heron Farms, which is really funny, like 30 years ago. Oren has something through his For the Gardener series up at Caspas's website on growing Asian greens. And then the last one is the grower guide on dry farming from UC Santa Cruz. That one's for tomatoes, but a lot of the same information applies to kabocha squashes as well. And finally, we're actually looking for land. Unfortunately, with this drought, the last 2 years, our irrigation is reliant on 2 reservoirs that are rainwater filled, and they're really, really low this year. So we'll be cutting back our production from 5 acres to about 1 acre this season while we look for land to transition to. We were already outgrowing the space that we were at anyways. So, um, this is kind of just the catalyst to get us to move to where we need to be. We're basically looking for 15, 20 acres within as far south as Watsonville and as far north as Santa Rosa. Ideally with existing infrastructure and very reliable irrigation water would be great. And here's just what we're looking for. So if you think you know anybody who has farmland that they're not using, you can send them our way. And this is Delise now. That's all I got.
Delise is unmuting.
There we go.
Okay, we got a lot of great questions. We're going to get to them in just a second, but let's talk about other classes that we have coming up. We have some great workshops. So some of you may know, we have had a plant sale usually for the last 50 years or so. And with COVID this year, we're going to try and do it again. We skipped it last year for a number of reasons, but we are busy growing plants. So in order to prepare for putting seeds and seedlings in the soil, Oren is going to present on soils and getting your garden ready. So that's going to be a good one in April. And we're also going to be doing a new experiment. And I want to do a shout out to Joy Akange, who gave us this idea. It's called a grow along. And what we'll be doing is growing a crop and following it with sessions every 2 months or so, where you can grow the crop, you can check in with experts, you can learn all about it up front. So this first class will be the kickoff, and we'll learn from Oren again, Oren Martin from UCSC, the amazing variety of winter squash that's available. This would be good for beginning gardeners, for kids, or people who really want to perfect the best pumpkin ever. And then, and that's going to meet 5 times. So that's just one of the dates. And then we're going to do an irrigation basics with another one of our former apprentices. And Avery's a wonderful person, and we all need to get ready to prepare for the drought that's inevitably coming again this year. You can sign up for these on the CASFIS website. They're on the homepage. And then we usually charge for these classes. You might be surprised. You know that this program is located on the UCSC campus in Santa Cruz, but it is not funded by UCSC in the way some other programs are. About 60% of our funding comes from grants and donations. And this work really cannot happen without you. So if you're one of the people who can afford to contribute, I will put another link in the chat that will be to the donate function as opposed to the membership function. So thank you for that. And let's get
I just want to plug, if you can contribute as well, I just want to say from my own personal experience, I have been so influenced by CASFIS. I went from a freshman in college who had never gardened before to now owning and operating my own farm business. And I've interacted with CASFIS throughout my time as an undergrad, a first-year apprentice, a second-year apprentice, and now as an alum who still on a weekly basis calls either Oren, Daryl, or Kirsten or Kelly. So just got to say, like, if you have the means, it really, like, CASFIS is the reason that I'm able to do the work that I'm doing.
You created you, Scott. All right, let's get to some of these great questions. How did you come up with that name, Shao Shan Farm?
Oh yeah, here, wait, let me stop screen sharing. Boom. Yes, I forgot to mention that. So Shao Shan Farm, the name comes from part of my Chinese name, which my grandma gave me, which also shout out to my grandma. My mom just texted me, my grandma's watching right now, and she sent me a picture of my grandma taking notes. So hi, grandma. But yeah, Shao Shan is part of my Chinese name. It basically means like youthful mountain, little mountain close to that. And for me, my sister and I both have Chinese names that we were given when we were born, but then proceeded to like never use once in our entire life, to the extent that like nobody remembered them, and my grandma had to look it up when I asked her. so, part of this whole project of me being, trying to embrace my entire identity, um, I just wanted to be able to like use that name that I was given at the same time as my other name, and really make good on it and do something with it and kind of like honor the importance of a name. So yeah, that's where that comes from. Also, it's like a little bit coy because the previous farm here on this property was called Big Mesa. So Big Mesa to like Young Mountain. It's like kind of kind of similar.
Great. So there were a number, this is a segue to the sort of social and cultural questions that came in. Do you feel pressure to sort of translate the value and the importance of these crops and these products to your non-Asian customers? Do you have
Yeah,
to
I mean, we do a lot of education of non-Asian customers, and I would say also Asian customers who aren't connected with traditional foodways, because also tons of folks' families have immigrated generations ago. And, from speaking for myself too, this whole project started out of me not having a super strong connection to these crops and wanting to develop it. Um, I would say our focus is definitely on providing vegetables that for people who are already familiar with them. It's not a big, I don't think my role at the farmers market is to be educating people first and foremost, but inevitably we do a lot of that. But really, the mission of the farm is more so to bring produce and food that folks are familiar with and have deep relationship with, just to do it really well and to do it organically and to have like good customer service and all those things. Yeah, like I think I saw in the Q&A like a question of the demographics of our customers. Like we have a CSA program. Our CSA is like 65 members, and I think about 60 of them are Asian American. And I'd say the vast majority of our farmers market customers are Asian American, and most of the restaurants and grocery stores we work with are Asian American run as well.
Great. Can you talk about the process of land leasing as a mixed race minority farmer, especially in Bolinas?
Yeah. Leasing land is like, I think just across the board, super tricky for farmers. It's really hard to find anywhere with good lease terms and long-term leases. I'm privileged enough to also be biracial and male and straight and all those things that also make land access incredibly more accessible for me. I'm also privileged in that I did the UC Santa Cruz program and had a lot of connections and that on my resume to be able to bring to landlords. But definitely during my land search, there was a couple landlords originally I wanted to farm in West Sonoma County, and a few folks like back to back that I went to wouldn't lease to me because they were like, oh, but you're not going to grow kale. Like, and because they had an idea of they wanted a farmer to come to their property and grow kale and tomatoes and lettuce and stuff for them to eat as like a benefit of having a farmer at their property. And when I told them I was growing Asian vegetables, they were like, oh, well, I don't really eat that. And then they kind of lost interest. So I was like, all right, this is like, whatever. Yeah.
Interesting. So some people wanted to know what other ways you would recommend people source and support Asian-owned farms. Is there a book? Is there a network? Is there a way to find them?
There's not really like a book or a network, but there's I would say so nationally, Asian farmers comprise 0.1% of farmers in our country are Asian American. But in California, that number is actually closer to like 11%. Pretty much all the Asian American farmers are in California for a variety of reasons. And the vast majority of Asian farmers are what are called specialty crop farmers, which basically means fruits and vegetables and flowers and not grain or cattle. So I would say just go to the farmers market. Most farmers markets in California have really great Asian American vendors. They might not be certified organic, but there's a lot of small family owned operations out of Fresno, by especially like Hmong farmers and Mien and Chinese farmers who don't necessarily grow organically, but they're also small scale and also great, amazing farmers too. So I would say supporting whatever farm is at your local farmers market, and then also supporting Asian American owned businesses, especially right now, supporting, even though we don't sell to like a lot of restaurants in Chinatown. We sell to a couple of restaurants in Chinatown and San Francisco, more like the gourmet restaurants. But I would just say right now, Chinatown needs like a lot of support for their businesses due to the pandemic, both with like xenophobia, but then also with lack of tourism. I think just supporting Asian American foodways in general right now, a big part of that looks like shopping at Stockton Street in San Francisco or grocery stores in Oakland and shopping at, yeah, restaurants in Chinatown as well.
Okay, let's move on to some crop specific questions. So container growing came up quite a bit. Do you have anything to say about that, and what crops would be specifically good?
Yeah, you can grow pretty much anything in a container, but like I mentioned with like dry farming, you're not going to be able to dry farm anything in a container. Container growing also, like, things just dry out faster, so you're going to have to water more frequently. But you can grow pretty much all of these, especially a lot of the greens. They have really, really shallow root systems, and you can pack them in really close. So you could take like a big pot and just sprinkle the entire surface of it and let it all kind of grow up, and then just kind of come through with your chef knife and cut everything off. But yeah, you could do like cucumbers, peppers, all that stuff. Stuff that needs higher heat also will probably do better in a container, because if you're growing in like a black pot, the pot is absorbing heat, and also you have all of that vertical surface area where the sun is hitting on it versus the ground, which is flat, and you're getting less surface area of the sun hitting it. So you could grow like bitter melon and things like that probably a lot more easily actually in a pot.
Is there any kind of garlic that you grow?
We don't grow garlic. I really want to. Our fields flood in the winter. And garlic you plant in the fall and it grows over winter, and then you harvest it the next year. It takes 9 months. So if we planted it, it would basically flood and then it would all rot, unfortunately. But the hope also with moving is that we can start doing a good amount of garlic production. And Oren has a really great guide on growing garlic through his For the Gardener series that I've like referenced a lot. So that's at UCSC Farm's website too.
Do you have any preferred cover crops? Do you cover crop?
Yeah, we cover crop the whole farm in the winter because that's pretty much all that can grow when it gets saturated. This year, the last 2 years, we've done an all legume cover crop. So we've done just bell beans and vetch. We haven't done any grasses because the grasses seem to not hold up as well when it floods in our field, and also because our fields drain really slowly because they hold on to a lot of water. A lot of times the grain will go to seed and it'll start to dry out and like turn into like hay basically by the time we can get the tractor in to mow it without getting the tractor stuck in the mud. So if we grew the grain, we have a risk of it just getting like really carbonaceous, and then it doesn't break down when we till it in as quickly.
Okay. So we also had a number of questions about people from different regions. So we have someone in Berkeley, West Marin. I assume that's going to be similar to what you're doing, with maybe a little bit more of heat impact. And then we have a couple of folks from LA and one young lady growing snow peas in New England. Is it possible to grow these vegetables in those locations, and what are the factors?
Yeah, I mean, you can grow Asian vegetables anywhere. It's like a whole it's like kind of funny to give a presentation on growing Asian vegetables because that's like giving a presentation on growing vegetables. So anywhere you live, like, you're going to be able to grow some kind of Asian vegetable. For us in West Marin, we're focusing on these cool season vegetables because that's our climate. But if you're in LA, you can definitely grow Asian vegetables, but you're going to be only able to grow the greens in the winter. And then you're going to be looking more at like all the gourds and the melons and chili peppers and eggplants and loofah gourd and things like that kind of through the summer. I would say like a great way to figure it out is to like go to the farmer's market. There are Asian farmers like everywhere. I feel like who are growing vegetables. So yeah, you can just see like what people are growing, what time of the year.
Yeah, I think it's a time of the year issue, really. It's like grow when it's cool, if it's a cool season crop, right? All righty, let's see what else. Someone wanted to know, how do you dehybridize a seed?
Yeah,
Is that a
that
simple answer?
what's that?
Is that a simple answer? Or is that a whole nother?
Yeah, kind of. I haven't fully done it yet, but I'm really interested in it, and we're starting it now. Um, Basically, like, so a hybrid seed is a variety that exists because there's two distinct parent plants. So like you got two tomatoes, like tomato A and tomato B, and every time you breed those two intentionally, the offspring is the hybrid of those two, and it's like really vigorous. But then the problem is if you save seed from that offspring, you end up getting all the recessive traits of the parent lines. So it won't save true to type if you save it. You'll get like 100 different tomatoes out of 100 different seeds. So the process of dehybridizing basically means taking the traits of that hybrid that you want, but stabilizing it to a point where you can save seed every year and get the predictable same plant. So you get 100 out of 100. Those seeds give you the same characteristics. What that looks like, people say it takes 7 years or 7 generations of the seed. But my guess is it's variable. But basically, you get your hybrid seed, you save seed off of it. Maybe out of 100 of the seeds, one of them or 5 of them are true to type, like they look like the one that you saved it from. You save those seeds, you grow another 100 of each of those, and then you find which ones of those look like what you want, save those, and you do that like over generation after generation, and eventually you're weaning, you're taking out all of the different genetics you don't want, and you're stabilizing the genetics that you do want. So a really good example of that, if you're in Santa Cruz, in the Santa Cruz area, is the Dirty Girl tomato from Joe Strummer from Dirty Girl Produce. So the Dirty Girl tomato is a dehybridized early girl tomato, whereas early girl tomatoes are a Monsanto variety. He has basically saved the seed and stabilized it into something that he calls the Dirty Girl, which gives the same characteristics and the same ability to be dry farmed and the same flavor, but he can save the seed every year, so he's not reliant on buying seed.
That was a great answer. Thank you. So a number of people are plagued with vertebrate, invertebrate, insect pests, and bolting. Any
Yeah,
at a garden scale? You know,
mm-hmm.
I know you're on a farm and you can't put a row cover on every single plant, but if in the backyard, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we almost put row cover on everything, which is unbelievable and is a headache. So I would say row cover for vertebrates and invertebrates is like the best way to go if you're just really trying to isolate something. Like we do like almost 2 acres of our farm are covered in row cover every year. You can go up to Mount Tam and you can see the farm is like white from the mountain. You see this like shimmering, moving white sheet. But yeah, so row cover for vertebrates and invertebrates. Bolting is a really big one. So bolting basically meaning the plant shoots up its flower stalk before it's actually formed like the vegetable that you want. So a leafy green will still be really small and it won't be like a full head of bok choy, but then it's going to like shoot up the flower stalk and stop growing leaves and start growing flower and seed. And it gets really bitter and it gets really spicy. So bolting is especially common as the day lengths are increasing. So the spring, this time of year especially, like things are just going to be bolting like crazy. And then once you get past the solstice and solstice and the day lengths start to get shorter, you really have less trouble with bolting. So for radishes especially, that's something that like when I was talking about storage crops, like daikon radish a lot of times are considered like are culturally associated with winter and storage and things like that, because they grow really well in the fall while the day lengths are getting shorter, and they won't bolt as much. We grow stuff like all the time and a lot of it does bolt, but again, with succession crops, like we're just planting so much and we'll harvest it just younger. So if we see one bolt, we'll like just try to harvest everything out as a smaller crop. Inevitably, some of the things do bolt and we end up just losing it, but we let it go to flower and then the bees go crazy on it, and we take the row cover off and we're like, oh, it's a pollinator row,
That's fun. Any tips for somebody from LA trying to grow these crops?
Yeah, in the winter, you're gonna want to grow all the leafy greens. But I would say in the summer, just like, I mean, I'm jealous of the heat in LA that you can grow. You can grow like eggplant. I would say just focus on the fruiting crops: eggplants, bitter melons, dongguo, like all kinds of anything like fruiting is gonna grow really well. If you're trying to grow leafy greens though, and you really want something for like stir fry kind of year round, There's a few more like Southeast Asian, like Malabar spinach grows really well in summer heat. I used to manage a farm in LA, and we grew that one through the summer because it was east of LA. Actually, it was so hot, and it was like the only leafy green that we could get to grow for our CSA. And also, there's a like sometimes it's called Chinese spinach or yin choy. It's a amaranth, and they're really beautiful. Um, there's a pink one, a green one, a variegated one, and they just thrive on heat. So those grow really well in LA in the summertime.
A lot of people wanted to know about resources for seeds and plants, and you provided a beautiful list of resources. So I want everyone to know that we're going to be, excuse me, sending out this recorded video as well as a PDF of the presentation. So you will have those in your hands. Question about rotation. What are good crops to rotate after the greens? And are there any like nutrient needs to consider when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, we try to rotate the greens ideally on a 4-year rotation for the brassicas, because like I was saying with the row cover, if the bugs are already in the soil, it's not going to help you to cover it because they're just going to like after they've slept over the winter, they'll emerge underneath the row cover. So we try to do a big crop rotation mainly for the brassicas to keep flea beetle away. But as far as what we follow with that, for us, this is a more of like a farm scale kind of example, but I rotate things based on plant family, but I also rotate things based on like soil intensivity. So we do till, we're not a no-till farm. And especially for the greens, because like I said, like with these successions, we're turning over each bed on our farm of greens gets planted 4, sometimes 5 times throughout the year. So that's 4 or 5 times that bed's getting tilled. It's a lot of soil work, and we're adding compost, and we're trying to, till with like good moisture and all those things that are essential for soil health. But inevitably, tillage is destructive to your soil. So after we have like our acre and a half or whatever of greens that are high intensive tillage, we'll rotate that to the next thing, which is ideally either going to be a summer cover crop. So we'll just put it into a winter cover crop, and then a summer cover crop, and then a winter cover crop, and it's basically getting like a whole year of covered fallow to recover. Or we'll go to something low intensive like the winter squash, where we just have to till it once and then we plant into it, and it's really low intensivity on the soil. Delise, I think you're muted.
Thank you. We had a poll in the beginning, and it had a very small amount of farmers, but they have some questions.
Great.
Let's see what there were. Do you use your own compost or do you buy it?
We buy compost. I don't have we're certified organic, and the regulations around making compost would be a nightmare. And we don't have a good feed source. Like I don't know anybody with a lot of horses or anything that could drop off manure. So we buy from Cold Creek Compost in Mendocino. They'll deliver a full truck. We're like within 10 minutes of their delivery range. So we just barely make the cusp for free delivery if we buy like a full transfer.
Got it. How do you set your prices? That was the question.
That's a good question. That's one that I'm always thinking about. There's a few ways that I set prices. In general, I think we pay like across the board, vegetables are really, really undervalued. And as a beginning farmer, I know that it's hard to increase prices. A lot of my farm mentors who have been in it for a long time are still selling vegetables at like $2 a bunch. Or you go to Tomatero, at the farmer's market, and it's like 3 for $5, which is an amazing deal, but I can't pay anybody or myself on 3 for $5. So I would say our vegetables across the board are probably the most expensive at our market, and I kind of intentionally do that. Pretty much everything is $4 a bunch, or $4 a pound, or like $4 to $10 a pound, depending on what it is, because greens are really light. I set those prices really high because one, it's what I actually need to set them at. Like it brings me the amount of money that I need to make to be able to pay my employees. Everybody gets paid over the table. Everybody gets paid as much as I can pay them. They get workers' comp. I include housing for one of my employees. Like I don't want to, I try to uphold as good of hiring practices as I can. And that's expensive. I also live in West Marin, which is it's like the most expensive place to live in California. So that's just real. But also I will look at Good Eggs actually online and see what they sell stuff for. And I price at about the same what Good Eggs sells, because I find that we have a similar kind of like clientele, and I feel like Good Eggs kind of up prices because of the convenience of delivery. And I like to, I do the markets myself, and I value my work there beyond just selling the produce. Like I do a lot of like customer interaction, and it's rare for the farmer to be at the market, I think. So I take that into consideration in the pricing too. And then I also, for a lot of this stuff, like there aren't, I can't look at what other farmers are selling it for because nobody else grows organic Ilan. So I look at what it's going for at 99 Ranch, and I basically double or triple that because it's that much more work. But yeah, I would say like first and foremost, it's like, what do I need to sell it for to be able to pay myself and my employees what we need to be able to survive? And then secondly is also like, what do I want to be selling this for, hopefully in like 5 years from now? Because it's hard to increase prices. People get upset. So I'd like to set it high now with the intention of holding it at this price for a good amount of time before I need to increase it again.
Do you allow visitors to your farm or have a volunteer program? Anything like that?
Yeah, we don't take volunteers except for so the only people who volunteer on the farm, we work really closely with some folks who do a mutual aid project in Oakland, and they come out every week and they glean anything that's extra in the field, and then we also donate anything that's left over from the farmers market to them. And for me, we're really busy on the farm, and if someone's going to come and volunteer, first and foremost, everyone who works at my farm gets paid. Like I don't believe in, you don't volunteer at the supermarket, you don't volunteer at a laundromat. Like we're a business, and far too often farm labor is devalued. So I don't want to create a system that's reliant on volunteer labor or could be perceived as utilizing volunteer labor. Like I don't think a volunteer should be out there weeding. If someone's going to be here volunteering or interacting with the farm, I either want to make sure they're getting paid fairly and compensated for the work they're doing, or they're getting some sort of an educational experience that's really intentional, and I'm able to give them either my full attention or employees' full attention, and that they're benefiting from the farm and I'm not benefiting from free labor. So that being said, pre-COVID, we had like workshops and stuff. Last year we didn't really do anything just because it was too much, but the hope is that this farm is really like a cultural resource center, and we would host workshops, and we would host holidays and stuff. People would come out and we'd have like big picnics and things like that. So hopefully in the future we can start doing that again.
What are you planting now?
Right now we're just starting everything in the greenhouse to hopefully get in like mid-April for our first plants out. So yeah, like everything the last 3 days have just been like 8-hour days back to back, just seeding all day. We did like a lot of perilla today. We sowed all of our peppers, which is even a little late. Because we're so low on water, I'm doing a bunch of stuff that is just like low water intensive and just kind of experimenting with stuff. Like we're doing tomatillos this year, which is not an Asian vegetable, but doesn't need water. Yeah, we did our first round of greens and scallions and shallots and things like that.
Is perilla considered an herb?
Yeah, perilla's an herb. There's a bunch of different perillas. We're growing 2 varieties. We do a Korean perilla and a Vietnamese perilla for 2 different customers.
All right. Finally, I think we better close this out. Any tips for graduating UCSC students that want to get in that program or get into the field? What do you recommend?
Getting into Caspis or getting into farming?
No. Just getting into farming.
Yeah. I would say, like, I tell everybody not to do it the way I did it. I I would say go work for like a production farm and see if it's really something that you want to do. If you don't have production farm experience, like fortunately, I just really love farming and I really love production farming and I love the business of it. In addition to kind of the like atmosphere of being on a farm and eating fresh food, but I don't think it's for everyone. I think once you leave like an educational farm context or a nonprofit farm context and you go into a business, it's a very very different structure with very different stresses and different demands. Um, I would recommend if you think you want to farm for a living, like like go work for a bunch of different farms and like learn and make mistakes on their money, go manage someone else's farm. I went like undergrad, like then I managed a nonprofit educational farm, then I did the apprenticeship, and then the second year, and then I owned my own business. So I never worked on a for-profit production farm except for my own, which I don't really recommend.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I learned so much.
Yeah, if y'all have any other questions, you can follow us on Instagram at Shao Shan Farm, SHAOSHAN Farm, and you can DM me or send me an email, shaoshanfarm@gmail.com.
And did you say what farmers markets you go to? Because I was busy typing.
Yeah, we do the Clement Street Farmers Market on Sundays in the Richmond.
Okay, great. All right, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Vanessa and Aaron, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.